Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to our next session of Avid Online. And for those joining us for the first time, a special welcome to you. Please refer to the chat box about more information on Avid Learning, the work that we do. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you tune in throughout the year. We use the extraordinary circumstances that 2020 brought upon us to innovate and transition our programming online. Our digital further learning campaign, Avid Online, began in April of 2020. And to date, we've completed more than 240 programs, including our much popular series, Premiere at Mumbai Opera. We hope to continue our support to the arts, maintain our connections with the creative communities, and facilitate learning and continuous dialogue with our audiences. So, whether it's online, we transition to physical events, or a hybrid mix of both, we'll stay true to our mantra that learning never stops. And this brings me to our evening session, Uncovering Urban Legacies, the Jewish Diaspora in Bombay, a live session on how this small but unique community and its rich culture and legacy have historically, economically, and socioculturally shaped the trading port city of Bombay. Two coveted academic perspectives on this fascinating community's influence in a variety of cultural contexts will be discussed and diverged. At Avid, our focus of ours has been on the Jewish community and its architecture, culture, business, trade influences in Bombay. We've had a few sessions around these topics in the past. Today will be our first online session on the topic, and we look forward to hearing more perspectives that will enrich our understanding of this community. Allow me to introduce our very impressive panel of speakers: author, Mumbai History Fellow at the Gateway House, Sifra Lentin; Professor, Department of History, University of Mumbai, Dr. Neeta Khandpekar; and Professor of History, Associate Dean of Faculties of Humanity, University of Mumbai, Dr. Manjiri Kamat. More about our esteemed panelists, please refer to their bios, which have been pasted in the chat section. They should have also been mailed to you earlier. Dr. Khandpekar and Sifra will share their knowledgeable perspectives on the subject and examine and celebrate the cultural legacy of Bombay's Jewish individuals, families, and communities. Both these eminent speakers will then be in conversation with Dr. Kamat to further trace the history, tradition, and culture of this community in order to understand the Jewish diaspora in their Indian settings. Please note that the session will last 75 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A, in which Dr. Kamat will be taking questions by the audiences. So please keep them ready. Start posting them in the Q&A box throughout. And in that note, thank you once again for tuning in. Over to our moderator, Dr. Kamat, to level set, and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad, and warm greetings to all. I welcome the speakers on the panel, and we start the session for today. The title of this panel is Uncovering Urban Legacies, Jewish Diaspora in Bombay. Over the years, several communities have traveled from across the world and made Bombay, now Mumbai, their home. Amongst these communities, there is one diasporic community, and that is the Jewish community. When it comes to Bombay, we mainly think of the Baghdadi Jews and the Beni Israel, who migrated to the city in the 18th century. If one looks at Bombay's history, the early communities included the Kolis, the Bhandaris, the Panchkalshis, the Pathare Prabhus, the Konkani Muslims, and so on. But as Bombay developed into a major trading port and Surat was declining, we find more and more communities coming from different parts of India and making Bombay their home. We have the Parsis, various Muslim communities, Gujaratis, and so on, who came to Bombay and enriched the socio-economic and cultural fabric of the city. But today's presentation is mainly focused on the diasporic community, and that is the Jewish community. The two eminent speakers with us, Mrs. Sifra Lentin and Professor Neeta Khandpekar, will explore in today's session the rich urban legacy of the Jewish diaspora in Bombay. So I welcome Mrs. Sifra Lentin to begin her presentation. Sifra.
Thank you, Manjiri, and thank you, Asad. Okay, and I'll begin right away because we have a fairly long session and I've got a lot of areas to cover. It's actually what I'll be doing is giving everyone a complete background of the two traditional communities that settled in Bombay and have actually contributed so much to our city. Now, as a Jew myself, I know that Bombay has a very special place in the hearts of India's Jewish communities because we came here in the 18th century and there were two very different and diverse Jewish communities that settled in our city. The Marathi-speaking Ben Israel community and the religiously conversant trading diaspora community of the Judeo-Arabic speaking Baghdadi Jews. Now, it would be relevant here to point out that the Baghdadi traders, of which the Baghdadi Jews of India are a part of, have been studied in overseas universities because they've left behind valuable letters and trading records dating back to the 9th century in the Geniza of the Old Synagogue in Fustat in Old Cairo. These valuable letters are known amongst academics as the Cairo Geniza. Can the slide presentation begin? So the term Geniza itself, you may be wondering, refers to a room in a synagogue. Every synagogue has a room where all letters or documents or prayer scrolls which mention the name of God are kept but never destroyed. So now how does that all relate to Bombay? Now, coming back to Bombay, the importance of the immigration of these two communities, the Baghdadi traders and the Ben Israel community, can be broadly summed up as one is in coming to Bombay, it provided a springboard for both communities to come into their own. It provided economic opportunities. There was religious tolerance in company rule Bombay or English Bombay. And also 300 years of peace actually gave both communities an opportunity to flourish and grow in the city. Secondly, for both the Baghdadi and the Ben Israel communities, Bombay became a center for their religious, community, and cultural life. For the Baghdadis, this was accelerated with the arrival of David Sassoon. Now, David Sassoon is the Nasi or the spiritual and community head of the Baghdadi Jews. So when he arrived in Bombay with his family in 1832, the focus shifted completely from Baghdad to our city, not immediately, but over a period of time. Now, as you can see in the slide in front of you, there's a photograph of David Sassoon seated with his two sons. The son on the extreme left is Elias Sassoon, the one wearing specs. The son right next to him in the traditional costume is Abdullah Sassoon or Sir Albert Sassoon. And the one in the Western outfit is Sassoon David, who was heading the office in London of David Sassoon and Sons. So during the early half of the 19th century, the Baghdadis wore these traditional costumes and slowly became westernized as they began interacting with the Europeans and the British. Now, to your right-hand side is a photograph of the Jewish community from the Konkan. Even the Jews, when they came to Bombay and slowly began interacting with other communities, actually changed, became more westernized in their clothes by the early 20th century. But this was the kind of clothes that or dress that they were wearing when they were in the Konkan and during their early arrival into the city. Now, the Ben Israel migrated from the North Konkan coastal villages into Bombay, and the first arrival is dated at 1730 and resulted in the building of their first synagogue, or the Gate of Mercy Synagogue on Samuel Street in 1796. The very fact that this first synagogue was built in Bombay brought an institutional focus to the organization of religious, social, and community life for this community. Because when they were in the villages, they were dispersed and they never had a center for their religious and community life. Many of the Ben Israels, when they came to Bombay, settled in the vicinity of their synagogue on Samuel Street and its adjoining areas like Isaji Street and Tantanpura, where you actually have even today an area called Israel Mohalla. This settlement pattern contrasted sharply with the centuries-old dispersion of this community in the villages of Kulaba district, today renamed Raigad district. Some of you here on today's event must be having second homes in places like Girard, Payne, Navgaon, Murud across the harbour from Bombay. So in fact, like the Maharashtrian communities of the Konkan, the Ben Israelis too have taken their family names from these villages like Girardkar, Painkar, Navgaonkar. Now, what is important that for anyone studying the Jewish communities of India is to remember two or three things about the community. One is in Jewish history, all through Indian Jewish history, the community has always been very minuscule. So at its peak during the census of 1941, there were just over 20,000 Jews in undivided India. So this gives us an impact on the community's contribution when I talk about it later, particularly in the port cities of Bombay and Calcutta. The second thing one has to remember is that in the context of global Jewish history, India's Jewish communities have never faced anti-Semitism on the subcontinent, with the exception of the Marrano Jews in Portuguese enclaves like Goa during the Inquisitions there. Lastly, the sea has been intrinsic to the history of both communities. And we're going to see how that plays out with their arrival into our country or to the Indian subcontinent, and how it plays out with their history in our city. This is a slide of the Indian Ocean trade routes that the Geniza merchants traversed. Okay, so in the age of sail, as you know, that the monsoon winds, the southwest and the northeast monsoon winds were used to crossing the Indian Ocean. And this trade from the 9th century right up to our early modern period, almost to the 19th century, the dhow trade or the sailing trade as it is called, actually used this wind system. So when I talk about the term Baghdadi Jew or Baghdadi trader, I'm not just talking about Jews from Baghdad per se. I am broadly referring to all Middle Eastern Jewry, like Jews of Aleppo, Basra, Aden, the areas in and around Baghdad, and even communities as far-flung as Egypt and Tunisia. In all the years that I have interacted with the Baghdadi Jews of Bombay, I have researched and written on this community, I have realized that there are two factors that bind them together. Firstly, ever since the destruction of the first Jewish temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonians, as early as 587, 586 BCE, Baghdad has been the center of Jewish life. It became the undisputed religious and cultural nerve center for Sephardic Judaism. It is to the ancient religious academies of Baghdad that all Sephardic Jewish communities in the Indian Ocean region and even in the Mediterranean littoral regions have turned to. Even the Kochini Jewish communities on India's Malabar coast turned to the academies in Baghdad when in doubt about any religious, civil, or legal issues that may arise within their diasporic communities. Now, this is a common thread and an important thread that bound all the numerous Jewish trading diasporas that dotted the entire sweep from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Second, for this community, it was trade and business opportunities that brought these merchants to Indian shores. These merchants in turn had strong community and business ties with other Baghdadi merchants based in port cities like Basra, like Jeddah, like Mocha, like Aden, and further north to Cairo and Alexandria. This community network or diasporic network that I am referring to was the mainstay of the success of the Baghdadi merchant community. This is very much like if you compare it to the Armenian merchant network, the Arab traders, and also to our very own Kutchi traders who traded in the Middle East. Now, as I mentioned before, the first substantial documentary proof that you have about this hectic Indian Ocean trade between the 9th century to the early modern period is actually the Cairo Geniza records. Most of these merchants were transitory residents on the coast of the Indian subcontinent, on the west coast. However, the first major settlement of these merchants take place in Mughal Surat from the 16th century. It is from Surat, as Dr. Kamat mentioned, that a lot of trading communities, including the first Baghdadi Jews, immigrated to East India Company, Bombay and Calcutta in the 18th century. Many joined these first immigrants directly from the Middle East. Now, in contrast to the Bene Israel of the Konkan, who had a long stay in the subcontinent, almost for 2,000 years, is that, and this is a community that you would know probably through the actor David or through the poet Nissim Ezekiel, who was very much a Bombay boy. This community is believed to have arrived before the destruction of the second Jewish temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE. And this community is popularly known in the Konkan as either Israel Lok or people of the Kingdom of Israel, Teli Lok or oil pressers, or Shanwar Telis is the most common term used when referring to them. And the last term is a pointed reference to the fact, when you say Shanwar, means Saturday oil pressers. They did not or refused or refrained to work on a Saturday, it being the Jewish Sabbath. And this was throughout the history on the west coast of India. Now, the term Beni Israel or the children of Israel was adopted by this community in the 19th century. And there is a good reason for this, because most scholars date their arrival anywhere between 175 BCE, when the kingdom of Israel was defeated, to somewhere between the 7th or 8th BCE for the arrival of the Beni Israel. This makes them one of the lost 10 tribes of the ancient kingdom of Israel. Now, the community's own oral history, which has come down the generations, and which even I was told of by my parents, was that our ancestors were shipwrecked off the mouth of Bombay Harbor, that is near the island of Heneri and Kineri, which is known as Undheri and Kandheri today. So these two islands actually guard the mouth of Bombay Harbor. And when the shipwreck took place, bodies of my ancestors were washed ashore, and only 7 men and 7 women survived this shipwreck. So today, if you go to Naugao Beach, you will see a memorial put up by the community to mark their arrival, and also 2 mounds where their ancestors are buried. Dwani, can you next slide, please? Now, what you see on this map is exactly how close the Beni Israelis were actually settled throughout their history next to Bombay Island. They were literally across the harbor, okay? But they did not come to settle in Bombay till Bombay came under British rule or company rule, as it were. Dwani, you can go to the previous slide. Now, I don't want to go into details about what happened to the Beni Israelis in that 1,600-year-old history in the Konkan mainland. But what I do want to do is I've summarized some points for you to read if you're interested, and you can ask further questions during the Q&A. I just want to draw your attention to the last point in this. It says that the Ben Israelis have a proud military history fighting in the local armies of the Marathas and other local rulers. Now, it is because of this tradition and proud military history amongst which most Ben Israelis families have, that they made the transition or decided to come to Bombay and enroll themselves or join the East India Company army. And this is how the first Ben Israel arrived in the city of Bombay in 1730. Next slide. Oh, now I've put up the family tree of the Bombay Sassoons, the Sassoon family. So you have an idea, you could follow what I'm saying as I talk about the arrival of this family into our city. Now, the migration of the Baghdadi traders from Surat to Bombay was because of the political and economic decline of the port of Surat by the 18th century. The first settler in Bombay from this community is supposed to be a Surat merchant, Joseph Sema, who moved to Bombay in the early 19th century. Now, it was only after the arrival of David Sassoon in 1832 that acted as a trigger for many more Baghdadi merchants to follow him and for also the community to emigrate from the Middle East into Bombay, because it also coincided with a time when there was a lot of political persecution in the region and also instability. So as a result of which, many of them actually fled and came here to Bombay. Moreover, David Sassoon and Sons was a growing family concern who needed more employees. So as their trade began flourishing, and initially they were trading with West Asia itself, he promised them basic amenities for all his Jewish brethren, basically a Jewish way of life. He provided homes, he provided schools, he provided a synagogue. Initially, the prayers used to be held in his own home, and later he built a synagogue for his community. So the increasing success of David Sassoon and his 8 sons, the second generation too was extremely successful, and the third, especially the 2 oldest, Abdullah and Elias, who after their father's death in 1864 parted ways to form David Sassoon and Sons and E.D. Sassoon and Sons, which later formed themselves into David Sassoon and Company and E.D. Sassoon and Company. Now, the business history of the Sassoon family and the 2 Sassoon firms is often compared to other local merchant communities, particularly the Parsi Tata business empire and the Karimboy firm. They all benefited from the cotton, opium, and cotton yarn trade with China. And it was this that helped them to enter manufacturing, banking, real estate, and finally transform themselves within the context of a globalized colonial world into a multinational operation. The parent firm of David Sassoon and Sons began in the early years in Bombay as merchants, as I mentioned earlier, in the West Asian coastal and overland trade. Now, unlike other Bombay merchants who dropped out from the China trade after the First Opium War of 1839-42, a few big Bombay firms like David Sassoon and Sons actually increased their presence in the China trade. So by the late 19th century, the 2 Sassoon firms, David Sassoon and Company and E.D. Sassoon and Company, owned 12 major mills between them in Bombay, employing 15,000 workers, including many Baghdadi and Ben Israel Jews too. Now, in this family tree, I want to highlight 2 or 3 things. Okay. Firstly, if you look at Sir Albert Sassoon's name, it's a blue box on the left-hand side of your screen, and you go to the 3rd box, which mentions his daughter Aziza. Now, Aziza and Ezekiel Abraham were the parents of Flora Sassoon, and Flora Sassoon became the first lady, or she's the granddaughter of David Sassoon, the first lady. She married her granduncle Solomon Sassoon, but after his death in 1894, she became the first lady to run the David Sassoon Mills, probably the first lady ever in Bombay to run a business. Okay, and she was the head of David Sassoon and Company's Bombay and office until she left, of course, for England in the early half of the 20th century. In fact, the first decade of the 20th century. Of course, by then, towards the end of the 19th century, David Sassoon and Company had shifted their headquarters to London because Sir Albert and his brothers had also shifted to London. The next slide. What you see here is actually the tickets of the David Sassoon Mills and the E.D. Sassoon Mills. Okay, so on your left-hand top corner, on the top corner on your left-hand side, is a ticket of the David Sassoon Mills. Now, when I say ticket, it actually means a brand. It's a glossy paper, a branded glossy paper, which is stuck onto bolts of cloth. Okay, so today we stamp these bolts of cloth, but in the past they had tickets, and now these tickets have become collector items. And the two bottom pictures are tickets from the E.D. Sassoon Mills. Now, the reason I've put the Sassoon docks, which was built by Albert Sassoon for Bombay. Initially, it was a private dockyard built by him in 1875. And he built it there in 1875 only so that cotton, yarn, cloth, and cotton bales could be loaded and unloaded close to the cotton green at Colaba. So it was actually Bombay's first wet dock. And a few years later, I think the Bombay Port Trust bought over these docks from the Sassoon family. Now, as we all know, the 19th century, especially the 1850s, was a period of great economic prosperity in our city. And this was heightened during the American Civil War from 1861 to 1865, when Deccan cotton, commanding an inflated price, was being exported from Bombay for the Lancashire mills in England. As a result of this event, and this doesn't relate just to the Sassoon family or to the Jewish community, as a result of this increased prosperity of the 1860s and from the 1850s onwards, community and civic philanthropy in our city witnessed a huge jump. There was also a greater engagement by the Sassoon family with the needs of the city. So, as was the case with other big satyas or merchant princes of the city, one can see in the objects of their philanthropy, which was largely in education, a reform home for juvenile delinquents at Matunga, and a number of hospitals, one in Mumbai, the Sir Sassoon David Hospital in the compound of the JJ Hospital, and 3 others in Pune, that the Sassoon family, where once they began with community donations and endowments, slowly shifted their focus to the city where they had settled in and where they had made their fortune. And this is very similar to other 19th century families, old families from Bombay. Next slide. Okay, so in this slide is important because you see the first Baghdadi. On your left-hand side is the Magen David Synagogue of 1861, built by David Sassoon. It is the first Baghdadi synagogue in Bombay. And as you can see, it's topped with a clock tower. Now, David Sassoon had a fondness. Most of his donations, as you will notice, always had a clock tower. And this is a very large synagogue, I would say even larger than the Knesset Eliyahu in Fort, which many of you must be aware of. And the reason why he built this synagogue in Baikala is that Jews do not use any kind of public transport on Sabbath or any holy day, especially Yom Kippur or Sabbath. So the synagogue has to be within walking distance for the community. And a lot of the community, most of the Baghdadi Jews, were settled in nearby Nagpada. And David Sassoon's home itself, Sanssouci, which is today's Messina Hospital, is actually within a short distance of the Magen David. Now, on your right-hand side, you see the Gate of Mercy Synagogue, 1796, which was built by Commandant Samuel Ezekiel Divekar as a thanksgiving for his life being saved during the Second Mysore War. Now, Samuel Street, which is an important street that runs parallel to Muhammad Ali Road, is named after Samuel Ezekiel Divekar. And also the Masjid Bandar station is named after the synagogue. So the synagogue is a very, very historic synagogue in Mumbai. Next slide. Now, these are just a few pictures of the Sassoon family's philanthropy in Bombay. Okay, on your left-hand top corner, you can see a postcard of the David Sassoon Library and of the Kala Ghoda, or the equestrian statue of King Edward VII, in front of the library. Now, the statue was actually put up to commemorate his visit as the Prince of Wales in 1875 to Bombay. Now, the statue no longer stands at Kala Ghoda, but it has lent its name to the entire precinct, which is known as the Kala Ghoda precinct, after this equestrian statue. The statue today can be found. It is located in the gardens of the Mumbai Zoo. Now, the institute behind it, that is the David Sassoon Library, was formerly the David Sassoon Mechanics Institute, and it was an institute and library for the mechanics of the port and of the mint and of the Bombay dockyard. So you can see how the endowments or the civic endowments of the Sassoon family were geared or given for the city and for the improvement of the city. These were all institutional endowments. Now, coming below, of course, we have the two lower photographs. On the top, on your right-hand side, is the Elphinstone Technical High School at Dhobi Talab. Now, the building itself is known as the Sassoon Building. It was donated by Sir Albert Sassoon for this technical institute. So you will see a plaque. If you enter this building, you will see a plaque there stating that he has donated 10 lakhs towards the building of the Elphinstone Technical High School. Below, the two slides below are both the Royal Institute of Science was donated by, he was one of the largest donators towards the building of the Royal Institute of Science building. This is Sir Jacob Sassoon, that is Elias Sassoon's son, who took over the running of the E.D. Sassoon Mills after his father. And you have the Gateway of India. Next slide. Before sort of continuing or ending with what happened to the communities, I just want to give a slight insight into the Indian Jewish contribution to Bombay's Hindi film industry. Now, actually, the Jewish contribution has been enormous in terms of literature, theater, the Navy in particular, military, civil services. It's been enormous. But I thought everyone would be interested because this has to do with Bombay's film industry, and a lot of Ben Israelis and Baghdadis actually were deeply engaged with the Hindi film industry. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but what I'm going to do is just throw out two perspectives. Basically is that the Baghdadi Jewish actresses like Sulochana and Pramila, and there were many others, were among the first female actors to enter Bombay's film industry, beginning with the silent era. Now, the reason being that in spite of it being a taboo for women acting in films or even on stage for that matter, and even when the talkie films were introduced in the mid-1920s and 30s, I think they were able to really navigate this tricky terrain successfully because many of them were involved with the film industry, largely because as a minority community, they were outside the pale of any caste hierarchies or any kind of stigma. They were not stigmatized by their own communities. In fact, both the communities were very involved with the film industry. And according to one scholar who I was listening to on the subject, he said very often the contract of these film actresses actually had a clause which specified that they had to be chaperoned at all times by a female relative, more often than not by their mothers. Now, filmmaking and the industry itself, as I said, was also much loved by the Ben Israel community. And there's a wonderful photograph. I could not put it up here today because it's copyrighted, of Ruby Myers or Solochana with the two founders of the Bombay Film Laboratory, both Ben Israelis, David Gershon Umadlekar and Solomon Moses Vakrulkar, along with a film critic, musician, actor, technician, camera, all of them belonging to the Ben Israel community. Of course, in the center, you can say that the most popular actor is from our community is David Abraham Cheyulkar. Now, this is just a short insight because time is short, but I just wanted to just name a few more names. And this is director Ezra Mir, Bunny Rubin, and the dramatist Joseph David Painkar. If in Q&A you'd like me to talk a little more about them, I'd be happy to. Next slide. Now, by the early 20th century, the Sassoon family, especially the family that managed the David Sassoon and Company group, were resident in England, including Flora Sassoon. It was the E.D. Sassoon and Company family and their male descendants from Elias Sassoon, Sir Jacob Sassoon, and Victor Sassoon, who continued to remain headquartered in Bombay. Now, it was just before Indian independence when Sir Victor Sassoon, the head of the E.D. Sassoon branch at that time, and someone who was extremely active in the civic and social life of our city, decided to sell all the E.D. Sassoon mills, and including the David Sassoon mills, and shift to Shanghai. He did this during the years 1943 and 44, and this was only because he feared the uncertainties, the political uncertainties of a newly independent India, and bet big, and in fact wrongly, on shifting to Shanghai, as the later history of the Sassoon family tells us. Now, as far as the Ben Israel community is concerned, they began immigrating to Israel in the 1950s, starting from 1948, 1950s, 60s, 70s, their immigration really started peaking. Now, they form a very sizable community in Israel, almost numbering 85,000 Jews. So they were actually torn between India and Israel because India became independent in 47 and Israel was formed in 48. But they wanted, once a few community members started immigrating, others also started immigrating, thinking that, you know, they wanted to be with their own community. So we have a very, very small community today left over in India. Now, in this last slide, I just want to end with the recent restoration of the Knesset Eliyahu Synagogue at Fort. I'm extremely pleased personally that this important landmark of our city and of my community has actually been restored, because I think it creates a virtuous cycle. In a way, it helps Jews visiting the city and even Mumbaikars to rediscover the history, the narratives, and the religious objects that are associated with Bombay's Jewish community, a very minuscule minority community in our city throughout its history, but whose impact throughout their 300 years has been enormous. Thank you.
Thank you, Sifra, for that fascinating presentation charting the history of the Jewish community in Bombay. We now have Professor Neeta Khandpekar, who has worked on the Jewish community as viewed through the prism of the press in India, and how the community was perceived and presented themselves to the outside world. So, welcome, Professor Khandpekar.
Thank you.
To begin with, I would like to ask you, can you speak briefly about the media and the importance of publications and the portrayal of the Jewish community in the newspapers over the years?
Yes, it's so nice that Sifra gave a very beautiful background about this community. Now, I am going to take you to a kind of a tour to the archival collection related to this community. As you can see the slides, if you see the slides on the left side, there is this newspaper called as Bombay Guardian. And on the right side, there is this periodical, the Oriental Christian Spectator. So, these two print medium newspapers basically were coming out from Bombay. And if you see, George Bowen was the editor of Bombay Guardian. The first issue of this weekly came out in March 1851, which is available in the Asiatic Society Library. This weekly continued till 1905, at least that's the July 1905 issue. I have seen it myself. And if you look through the information covered in Bombay Guardian, it does cover information related to the Jewish community, because this community took education in the premier institution set up by none other than John Wilson. Dr. John Wilson, incidentally, was also Vice Chancellor of our Mumbai University, and he was continuously writing also in the Bombay Guardian and also in his own periodical Oriental Christian Spectator. As we see, there is a kind of a cross connection also when we look at it. Once Mrs. Wilson wrote to her sister a letter dated 20th February 1830 in the following words. She writes, such publications was particularly required in the presidency owing to the dearth of information which prevails on religious and missionary subjects. So both these weeklies were highlighting the news related to the Jews, and especially sometimes statistical informations, the books published by the Bombay Tract and Book Society on the Jewish history were also featured. Next slide, please. So you can see the list related to the Jewish community, and you can see the font size of this advertisement. And in one of the sections, this is particularly mentioned. So how old is the newspaper? One can have a feel from this photograph. And we also see the contribution key, like how the first girls' school in Bombay was rather called as Salem School, which was formed by the American mission in Mumbai as early as 1824. And it is specifically mentioned that this Salem School came up for the Jewish girls, and later on the native girls also started taking admission here. Next slide.
Yeah, I was about to ask you
Yeah.
how it benefited, the education benefit the Jewish community in Bombay.
Yeah. So this, the media coverage, these two weeklies which I had shown above, they were highlighting, like we see this information, this chart shows various religious girls studying in this school, and one can see the Hindus and Jews were the most enrolled from this particular table. And the missionaries specifically targeted schools. Schools constituted one of the most important departments of their missionary labors. And in the examinations of the schools of the Scottish orphanage, sometimes they used to also give essay competition of the nearby areas. So a lot of these schools were situated into Girgaon. So once there was an essay topic given called as Natural History of Girgaon, and lot of students wrote an essay on that topic, including the female students, participants there. Now, as far as the education work is concerned, one more thing I would like to highlight, of course, the Bene Israeli students were taking education in these schools run by the Scottish missionaries, but there was a vice versa. An example is there wherein one Mr. Dadaji from Ashtami area near Roha in Konkan, he was having a big bungalow. So he gave this big bungalow
to the AMM, American Marathi missionary, Justin E. Abbott, who writes it's in a letters column in Bombay Guardian of December 17, 1885, and he commemorates Dada Saheb's effort to give to the missionaries this space to propagate education in that area. So it's a give and take kind of a relationship when we go through these letters.
Okay. We would also like to know, Bombay seems to have been the center of the Protestant missionary societies. So, what was the perception of the community in the city, especially with relation to the missionaries and their efforts in Bombay?
Yeah, here again, I would like to repeat the efforts of John Wilson. He not only restored the identity part to the Bene Israelis, but also restored to them their scriptures. He helped to bring them into their vortex of modern civilization through education. The missions maintained a reading room and a library in Bombay in the Bene Israeli locality, which Sifra earlier talked about in her presentation. One of the streets is named after the community she very beautifully highlighted. And also, next slide, please. Also, when we look at this particular slide, it's clearly showing in the red box how the Jewish synagogue is given an importance in the write-up. And this particular left side rough map shows the location of Girangaon areas. Khetwadi, you can see a star is made where the Bombay Guardian office was located, about which weekly I am speaking to you. So this is of 1899 edition, and the Wilson College is equally shown there with the Tower of Silence marked in the dot in the Malabar Hills. So these kind of information do sensitize us about the contribution as far as the write-up on the Jewish community is concerned. Next slide.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is also one of the contribution of Pandita Ramabai, because she started her Sharda Sadan first in Mumbai behind Wilson College, and she specifically mentions in one of the write-ups in Bombay Guardian how if she was abroad, her Sharda Sadan work was being carried out by another convert, Sundarabai Pawar, and one Bene Israeli women. Specifically, she mentions in that letter, Mariam Bai, she was helping Sundarabai Pawar to run the Sharda Sadan when she was not there. And in the center picture, if you see, Pandita Ramabai's rare photograph is published in March 2nd, 1895 issue of Bombay Guardian. In fact, its issues, this she is the only Indian I could see wherein her picture is published. So this is one more interesting area of research.
Uh, we in this presentation have seen the close link with the Konkan, with Sifra's presentation as well. So, can you shed some light on the Konkan links and the Jewish names and nomenclature in Bombay and the nearby coastal areas like Alibag?
Yeah, next slide. Yes, this is very interesting. Like how the Jews in the Konkan area got assimilated with their surroundings. So these are the surnames which even Sifra talked about, and some of the surnames, when they shifted to Bombay, they retained it. But there were also kind of names which were Indianized, like Samuel became Samaji, Ezekiel became Hasaji, Isaac became Isaji, and even female names were like Hasu, Esu, Akka, Makka, Taka, Pittu, like these names they assimilated. So they assimilated pretty well in this community. You know, in their weddings also, there was this Haldi celebration, putting up mehndi in their hands. And the dressing part, Sifra rightly showed her in her first picture itself, how in her black and white pictures, they were wearing a Nawari sari. So they equally assimilated pretty well in that area.
Neeta, coming to more recent times, can you tell us how for instance, the David Sassoon Library anniversary celebrations were portrayed in the media? I believe you have done some work on this.
Yes, next slide, please. Yes, as we know that the David Sassoon Library actually was founded in 1847 but its actual building in the present state, which even Sifra highlighted in her presentation, came up only in 1870. And David Sassoon's son Albert donated the bookshelf part in a very big way to the library. These two particular photographs are from the newspaper coverage by Geeta Desai. The first one is by Geeta Desai and the second one is by Hemant Kapadia, showing how the renovation of David Sassoon's statue of the library took place and how the library was really having a lightning part, so that it makes sense even during the Kala Ghoda festival, because the festival is just across the building. So in that sense, the press was really highlighting. And also when the Hope Street was renamed as David Sassoon Library Marg, after the library, a big political function in which Chhagan Bhujbal also participated, and Rachel Manessa, the only surviving descendant of the eminent Sassoon family, was participant. This was covered by the press in a very big way. So the press coverage is still highlighted, and even the Marathi newspapers do cover about this community. This is my observation.
Thank you so much, Professor Neeta Khandpekar,
Thank you.
for, as you say, this foray into the archives and showing us this rich history of the press and the perceptions of the community. I would now like to throw this discussion open in a panel where I invite Sifra, Lentin, and Neeta Khandpekar, where we discuss the broader theme of today's panel, which is the uncovering of the urban legacy of the Jewish diaspora in Bombay. Uh, what I would like to first ask, and it's open to either of the panelists and both to talk about it, as to how can we look at the broader cultural legacy of the community, whether it's Beni Israel or Baghdadi Jews. For instance, Sifra spoke about literature, you spoke about theater, you spoke about civil service. So, would you like to throw some more light on the cultural legacy of the Jewish community in Mumbai today?
Uh, Dr. Kamat, I mean, actually, there are a lot of facets to it. One is I would talk about food. I think food is really the cuisine. Now, when the Baghdadi Jews came to India, they brought their cuisine with them. And the Ben Israeli cuisine, like, for example, aloo makala, they have a special chicken dish. I don't get the names directly, I mean, immediately to my mind. But the Ben Israelis, a community I belong to, I know for a fact that one of their cultural legacies, as far as the cuisine is concerned, is that although they were a marooned community and were out of the mainstream of Jewish life for almost 1,000 years, they adapted their cuisine in such a way that they did not violate, they followed the kosher laws. So they never ate crustaceans, they never ate fish without scales, they never mixed milk and meat. So most of their food uses a lot of coconut milk and coconut in it. So that is one of the legacies of the Jewish community, is the cuisine. Okay. The other cultural legacy I would really look at is actually the community life, which is still alive today, although we are really small. I mean, just a little over 4,000 Jews in mostly in Bombay and Thana. Thana has got a big community of Jews. Uh, we still have our synagogues functioning. We hold our evening prayers every day. Every time there is always a minyan of 10 people. I go to the synagogue during the high holidays for prayers. Of course, this year it wasn't possible because of COVID times. So I wouldn't say that the cultural legacy is it's there and it's being kept alive, and it sort of gets reinforced when relatives and friends visit from Israel, visit from the US, visit from Canada, because they want to go and visit all the Konkan synagogues. They want to meet the community during the high holidays. So I feel there's still a very vital part and a vital Jewish heart to Mumbai.
Right. That's interesting. Secondly, the period which you, as well as Neeta has covered, especially when you think of the 19th century, is a period where we see so much happening in Bombay in terms of social change, various associations coming, there are various debates, cases, in the newspapers, in the Bombay context, as well as the nationalist movement. Would Neeta and Sifra like to tell us something more about the Jewish community in this wider backdrop?
Yeah, I would like to highlight about Russian Jew Hafkin's role during the plague epidemic in Bombay.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, it was mentioned that he was specially called from Calcutta to the Bombay presidency when the first plague case was discovered to really legitimize the fact that, yes, the plague is spreading. So, and then the Hafkin Institute coming into Bombay and playing a very big role as far as, and still today we really admire this structure in a very big way as far as the medicinal line is concerned. So this is equally important.
That's a very pertinent point, I think, today, especially in the context of COVID-19. I think, especially the younger generation may not be aware. So, a very important point raised by Anita is about the work of Waldemar Hafkin, the Russian Jew, and his work in not the plague vaccine, but also the cholera vaccine, and how the Bombay Bacteriological Laboratory, as she says, as a tribute to him, was named the Hafkin Institute. And it is a legacy which remains to this day, and we, especially in the context of public health, which we are becoming more and more aware of in the context of the pandemic. Thank you. Sifra, would you like to add anything, especially in the context of the nationalist movement?
I mean, our Jews were quite involved in the nationalist movement. You see, we had the Erulkar brothers who were actively involved. That is David Erulkar and his brother Abraham Erulkar, who actually attended to Mahatma Gandhi. He was Mahatma Gandhi's personal physician for a time during his fast. And David Erulkar was involved. And actually, I've been through the archives, especially when studying the Karachi Jews. And I've been through the community papers and magazines. And I find that what happened during this period, especially the 1920s to the 1940s, early 40s, was that the community itself did not want to talk about the freedom movement, only because they were all had jobs in government. They were either working in the port trust, or they were working in the municipality, or they were working in the electricity board. So in fact, when communities, this was a period also when the Israelite Association and another community organization was founded in Bombay. There were two community organizations, and they decided consciously not to bring in anything concerning the freedom movement, and even to a certain extent, Zionism. So information about the freedom movement and Zionism would appear in their papers just to keep people updated, and people were curious about it. Okay, but it was not actively discussed on a community platform. But we did have a lot of nationalists within the community. And in fact, outstanding nationalist from the Baghdadi community was Morris Jaffet, who wrote a lot on the national movement. So there were people who were involved, but in their individual capacity, they did not mix it with community. But the community was curious. I haven't studied the Baghdadi papers and the Baghdadi newsletters, so I'm not aware about the reaction from their side, really.
And we had even a mayor, a Jewish mayor, E. Moses, in Mumbai.
We had 3 Jewish mayors for that matter. I was just telling Manjiri the same thing today when we spoke. We had, I'll just give you all the names. We've had three mayors. One is Dr. E. Moses, of course, who's from the Baghdadi community. And we had, we had Solomon, we had, there were 2 Baghdadi mayors before Dr. E. Moses. When the names come to me, I'll sort of mention it.
So so in the civic life of Bombay, we see this contribution as well, and Sifra will come back to us with that. You spoke about the Hindi film industry and the actors, actresses from the Jewish community. Can we turn our attention to women of the Jewish community, and if you could tell us something about their contribution, whether it's in the arts and literature or in other fields?
The Jewish women are quite feisty, in that sense, whether they are Baghdadi or they are Ben Israeli for that matter. So the Baghdadi women were, they were feisty enough to join the industry, which was a big thing in those days. Ben Israeli women were more shy of that, but they also made quite a few reach quite a few milestones. In the sense as Dr. Jerusha Gerard is extremely well known in the Bombay medical history, because she was the first woman to get a government scholarship to study in England. And she was the first woman, I think she was the first woman obstetrician and gynecologist. And she was the dean of the Kama and Alblis Hospital. So she did a lot. And even for the community, she was extremely active, in the sense is she founded a ladies organization called the Stri Mandal, which still exists even today. And she founded what is called the Jewish Religious Union. It's a reform movement. All our synagogues here are basically conservative or orthodox. And she founded the GRU, which actually talks about meaningful worship, in the sense is the prayers sometimes are read out in English so that you understand what you're reading. It's a reform movement of Jews, and it's been established by Dr. Jerusha Gerard, and a lot of it's got quite a following even today amongst the community. So, you can either attend prayers at a conservative synagogue, like I do at the Magen Hasidim, or you could go and attend the GRU prayers, which are conducted in English, and what the press say is also discussed, So it's interesting. She was quite a figure both for the city as well as for the community.
Right. So that's important.
And I'd also like to mention another lady who comes immediately to mind is Rebecca Rubin. Now, Rebecca Rubin also went to England to study education. And she turned down a job in Baroda as a senior educationist and teacher to come and actually run the Sir Ali Kaduri School in Bombay, which is the Ben Israel School. It was originally a Ben Israel school and then renamed the Sir Ali Kaduri School because the Ali Kaduri family from Hong Kong had given a donation for rebuilding the school and rebuilding it and refurbishing it. And she was the principal for a long period of time of the Sir Ali Kaduri School. So she had a lot to do with the education of the Ben Israel community and the children,
Yeah, so that's very interesting information, especially of Dr. Girard also, who worked at the Kama Hospital, which, for the benefit of the audience, was a hospital which was, staffed by women, catering to women and children. So I think that it's a very important contribution. You spoke about the business history, particularly focusing on the Sassoon family, and took us through the trade of the 19th century to the time when they built mills, and it's a very vast business empire stretching from London to Bombay to Canton. Would you like to tell us something about situating this in brief in the wider business history of Bombay in the 19th and early 20th century, particularly in the colonial context? We know that the textile industry was facing difficulties, particularly in the interwar period. Any thing you would like to say about this in that context of Bombay in terms of the business history?
Dr. Kamat, I did mention that the Sassoon business history per se has to be contextualized in the business history of other business groups, particularly the Parsis, as I said, like the Tatas, the Gigi boys. Of course, the Gigi boys never went into manufacturing. all the Bombay merchants who made their money during this period, they took advantage of the colonial city network and the economic network to expand overseas, as it were. So I did mention that they followed the same thing. They began as traders, they became agents of the company, they went into trade, especially where in China, where they made a lot of money. Now, all these businesses had branch offices from everywhere, right from on the Malabar coast to Calcutta, to Karachi, to Aden, to Shanghai, to Canton, to Hong Kong, to Kobe. So they were spread all across. The problem that happened with the Sassoon family was essentially that Victor Sassoon bet big on Shanghai rather than keeping entrenched in India, as it were, because he was very sort of, I must have been perturbed by the upheavals that were happening during the national movement. Now, any kind of political upheaval is bad for business. So there was not a question. It was not a question of political loyalty. It was more a question of looking at business profitability. And I think that's the reason why he felt safe shifting to Shanghai. But as we know that Shanghai also fell, and he had to leave Shanghai in 1949 and go to the Bahamas, which is a tax haven. But and where the Sassoon Trust, they still do have offices in the Bahamas, even to this day. The Sassoon family is also resident in London. But the issue was that the descendants were not really interested in continuing with business, like the first generation and the second generation. So in that sense, the Tatas stayed put in India and they have grown from here. I mean, and with today's present globalization, it's also a multinational empire. But unfortunately for the Sassoons, there was no one who was able to take over after Sir Victor. So I think that was one of the reasons, and that, they sort of, although they do have businesses yet,
Thanks. One of the interesting parts of both your presentations is that you showed us some lovely visuals of the built heritage, the legacy of the community, in terms of the David Sassoon Library, the Gateway of India. Can you tell us something about the architectural styles, or for instance, the Knesset Eliyahu Synagogue, which has, won a UNESCO award? It would be lovely for the audience to know something about the architecture.
I'm not very familiar with
as well as the restoration, because I
yeah. I'm not really an expert on architectural styles and things like that. But what I can tell you is actually two or three things which people from outside may miss when they go into a synagogue. One thing is, when you enter a synagogue, you will always see that it is pointing west towards Jerusalem. Okay, and most of the beautiful stained glass work that you see in the Knesset Eliyahu, in just below that is the Hekal where the Torah scrolls are kept. So when we pray, you see the women's galleries on the top. This is an Orthodox synagogue, so women don't normally sit downstairs. The men are below, but they can see the services happening. And we always face west towards Jerusalem when we are praying. So the Sassoon synagogues are splendid. I mean, they've used the architectural styles that were popular in that period of time, and they are really, really nice. But the fact is that you will never see an image of any kind in a synagogue, and all synagogues, whether Ben Israeli or Baghdadi, across board, will follow the same religious precepts of any synagogue across the world.
Right. Okay.
So, people are not sensitized to that. So I thought I would mention it, but I'm not an expert really on the architectural style. But I'm really happy that the Knesset Eliyahu has been restored.
Also, I would like to highlight about the Chinchpokli synagogue, which we see right across the station.
Right. Okay.
So it does feature in the Bombay Guardian when Albert Sassoon's wife she passed away.
No, it's a cemetery.
Yeah, it's a cemetery, but it is still a Jewish heritage.
Right.
in terms of the built heritage. Yes,
The built
of course.
heritage, yeah.
Finally, before we take audience questions, I would like to come to the important theme of philanthropy, which has which is a theme I find in your presentation. Uh, if you look at the Sassoons or even the others, as well as you said, there are other communities where you see public-private partnership in a big way. And it is a rich legacy which we see around us in terms of schools, in terms of hospitals, colleges, places of worship, and so on. Uh, can you tell us something about the philanthropic aspect of the Jewish community? Of course, the Sassoons, but beyond that, if there is something which we are not aware of, can you throw some light on that?
Uh, Dr. Kamath, actually, there are two things I can really talk about, and then maybe Dr. Neeta can take it. Two things that come to mind immediately. During the interwar years, we had a large community of European Jewish refugees in our city,
Yes, yes,
who were looked after by the local communities.
yes.
And one of these, actually, one German Jew called Mr. Gerard Gabriel, actually built a school on Worli Hill called the ORT School. ORT School is the Organization for Rehabilitation and Training. Now, he lived in India for many years, and my mother used to be a trustee of the school. And the object of that school was, it's an international Jewish network of technical schools where he was actually training Ben Israeli kids who are immigrating to Israel with skills that would be useful for them in Israel.
Right.
So a lot of them were taught catering, a lot of them were taught hairdressing, a lot of them were taught later when computers became the thing, were taught computers, they were taught mechanical things, which were all useful trades to know. So this school was very, very important to our community, especially at the time when the youngsters were immigrating to Israel. Another important school is the Sir Eli Kaduri School, which was founded by the historian of the community, Mr. Kehimkar, Haim Samuel Kehimkar.
Right.
And he was deeply interested in the education of the Ben Israel children. So he built the Ben Israel Benevolent Institution. He built the Ben Israel Education Society, founded it. And after that, it became like the school building was at just behind the Erikaduri school is at Masgaon, but just more towards the eastern side. And the school building, when Rebecca Rubin was the principal, she got Sir Eli Kaduri, she met him in London, and she got him to endow the school with a substantial amount of money. And the building was named in his honor, and the school was also renamed in his honor.
Right.
Also, I would like to just add here, it came to my mind, we have also Dr. Kehimkar as the butterfly man of India.
Yes, yes, yes.
So his contribution is equally to be, and
yes,
Dr. Manjiri madam was our HOD. She had organized a beautiful program of Kehimkar, sir.
Right, right.
So
Was a
that is
lecture he had come to us.
beautiful books on butterflies of India.
Right, right.
Groundwork he has done.
Yeah. So on that note, I think we end this part of this panel where we have done a discussion with both of you. I thank both the panelists for the panel discussion, and we now turn to the audience questions. There is a question by Adil Desai, and he says Garcia Dorta and his sister were probably the first Jews from Bombay to be discriminated against by the Portuguese, especially after his death. Could you elaborate on this fact? The questions are open to both the panelists.
Should I take this question?
Yes, yes.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, Adil Garcia de Orta actually was a Marano Jew. So he was a famous Portuguese physician, as we all know, and he had actually leased Bombay Island. Now, he had an eventful stay here on the west coast of India, but when he died, and during the Inquisition, his remains were taken out and burnt in Goa. So
Right.
his sister also suffered the same fate, of course, but she was alive at that time. So in that sense, I would say Garcia de Orta is probably the first known Jew to have settled in Bombay, but he faced the wrath of the Inquisition after his death in that sense. So the Moranos are actually Jews who are converted to Christianity, but who followed Judaism secretly. So when he was discovered to being a Jew, his remains were burnt. And his sister was also faced the same fate after that.
Okay. There is a question from an anonymous attendee. It says, did the Baghdadi Jews and the Beni Israel get along? Like, were they welcome in each other's synagogues? And how were the relations between the two?
Uh, Manjari, it's like this, that in the early years, the Baghdadis and the Ben Israelis, the Baghdadis and the Ben Israelis worshipped together. But of course, the communities are very, very different. Their histories are very, very different. The Ben Israelis are more Indianized, and the Baghdadis, when they came here, of course, they were Middle Eastern, but they began sort of associating themselves more with the British because their business interests also were with the British and the English agency houses. So they mixed with each other in terms of employment. As I said, many Ben Israelis and Baghdadis were employed in the mills. Even today in Israel, they visit each other's homes. There's no difference. Even today, but there was a point at which in the history of the community where there was a lot of acrimony between the two, and Ben Israeli Jews were not allowed into Baghdadi synagogues. But that was for a brief period of time when the Baghdadis wanted to be associated more with the Europeans for many reasons, because they were also, in terms of, I think, if I'm not, the Government of India Act, I think 1935, which said that for representation, certain special groups like Anglo-Indians and, could be given representation in the legislative councils, as a minority community and a foreign community. So I think there was a bit of politics, but by and large, I mean, if you take the whole arc of history, I don't think that really matters. It was really for a very short period of time.
Right. There is another question about, which says, did Indian independence and the British leaving India have a lot to do with the Jewish community also exiting the country?
I don't think it was more the, for the Sassoon family per se, the British leaving India meant economic instability and political instability, as I mentioned. They had nothing per se against Indian independence. Let's be very clear about this. I think just a minute. I think it was more business interest. I mean, you're running this huge empire and this like 15 mills, 15 to 18 mills almost, with 15 major mills. I think the responsibility of that and the fact that you cannot take a business risk in any way was the reason why they left. Now, a lot of Baghdadis were employed in Sassoon enterprises. So when it became possible for them to immigrate overseas to the West particularly, they took that opportunity. Now, even where the Ben Israelis are concerned, a lot of them also sort of took the opportunity to leave when the state of Israel was formed. They felt that they should go to the Holy Land. In fact, there are travelogues by Ben Israelis who visited the Holy Land in the early 20th century. And next year in Jerusalem is a recurring thought for every Jew. So today, I mean, of course, we have a Jewish homeland, but all of us would go and visit Jerusalem. So it was more a religious, and later on also became and sort of an economic factor for most of the Ben Israelis to leave. And it is in Israel, actually, that We have Baghdadis who live more in the cities. The Ben Israelis live in the townships. And they're all doing fairly well for that matter.
Okay, there is a question again from an anonymous attendee which says, does Jewish mysticism have any ties or commonalities with our Indian philosophies? Would either of the panelists or both like to address this?
I am not qualified to address that, Manjiri.
Somewhere in her slides, Sifra had shown Shivaji and Tukaram.
Yeah.
So the Sassoons taking that kind of a emblem, kind of a thing for their industry. So Tukaram is regarded as a mystic,
Right.
especially from the Indian tradition.
Yes.
So that is an Indianized version. Again, they might have taken it. So that's my
Right.
take.
Okay. Coming to the Hindi film industry, there is a question whether there are still any Jewish influences, or does it still display evidence of the community's impact? As in, the question is about the contemporary Hindi film industry. Since you have spoken about the legacy in the past, the question is, do we still see that Jewish influence in the film industry?
I read somewhere that in Israel, people like Bollywood films.
Okay.
Sifra may comment on that.
No, Dr. Kamat, actually, I would take this question in two ways. See, you would not have films made on Jewish themes like Yahudi Ki Beti or whatever, because now the community is really small and there are not too many Jews really involved. Or, people don't come across or have Jews as neighbors or interact with them on a daily basis. But I do know that there are descendants of some of these actresses or families who are still active in the Jewish community. Like I was listening to a lecture and someone mentioned that the actress Pramila, whose photograph came up, her son is involved in the film industry. And he was actually one of the scriptwriters, one of the two scriptwriters for Joda Akbar. So we do have some Jewish influence still there, and I was really thrilled to actually hear about that. But I can't. Other sort of examples don't come to mind.
Right. There is a question on, is the story of the shipwrecked Beli Israels off the coast of Bombay authentic or apocryphal? If the latter, what is the real story of their immigration?
I strongly believe that it's a shipwrecked community per se. Okay, because if you take it in the broader context of history, for example, the Chitpavan Brahmins, they have a similar story of shipwreck. And this North Konkan coast was particularly known to be prone in the age of sail for people being shipwrecked, people being marooned. Now, there are two factors which I sort of put together. It's circumstantial. There's no archival evidence because it happened 2000 years ago. So it's impossible to get that kind of evidence. And there are two things. One is we have a very ancient community of Malabari Jews in Cochin. Okay, there are two communities of Jews in Cochin, the Pardesi Jews and the Malabari Jews. Now, the Malabari Jews are as old as the Ben Israeli Jews. So they have come to the southwest coast of India or the Indian subcontinent as long ago as the Ben Israelis. And so possibly the Ben Israelis were a group that were heading to the Spice Coast or to the Pepper Coast of Malabar. And they happened to be shipwrecked and marooned here for 1,000 years before they were discovered in the 10th century. So that's the way I look at it. The mounds will never be disturbed because the Ben Israelis or no Jews will allow their burial sites to be disturbed. In fact, there was a proposal for it, but the community was totally against it. So we will never know really in that sense.
Professor Subhash Shinde asks, Sifra, would you please throw light on the history of Jews from Thane? And he says there is a Jewish community in Thane residing especially in the Charai area. And also there is a synagogue near the civil hospital in Thane.
The Jews in Thane are basically from the Ben Israel community. It's a large community. It's my community. And I do know that even my grandfather, as a young boy, when his father died, and he and his mother and his brother, they resided in the compound of that Thane synagogue before they left for Karachi. So that Thane synagogue is late 19th century, and there was always a Jewish presence there. I believe you won't believe it, I've never visited it, I've always wanted to, but I believe it's right in the center of town. And it's a late 19th century synagogue, and it's been recently restored, I think, by the Sifra group, who have contributed to the restoration of that synagogue. And we have a very, very, in fact, the largest settlement of Jews is in Thane today in India. Yes. So you can say the largest Jewish settlement is in Thane.
Yeah,
I think
even Shalva Vale has mentioned about the Thane Jews.
Right. I think Dr. Neeta will agree that some of our students who are listening to us, I think it encourages them to, pursue these topics for.
I wish they take up research.
Yeah.
In this area.
There is a final question which I will take and then wrap up. It is, what does and can the existing community in Bombay do to keep their unique subculture and identity alive in the city and the nation?
Should I take that one?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, they're doing a lot. And we have an organization called the AJDC, which has a lot of programs for the youth. And especially with, we have what is called as, there's a revival of the kirtan form of art, in the sense it's kirtan performances, where biblical stories are told. And this was something that was, prevalent in the community, and it's being revived. So sometimes, occasionally, we have these performances, we have youth get-togethers. Of course, the festivals are celebrated together, either in the synagogue or at the AJDC, which is in Matunga. So the community is very, very well lit and very close, particularly now that we are so few. So I think that there is a vibrant Jewish subculture, and the fact that people come from Israel, especially in Israel itself, for that matter, we have a very popular Marathi newspaper or periodical called My Boli. Which, and we had once, I think in the 1990s, there was an international Marathi conference, literature conference in Israel. Mm-hmm. So not only is the community there keeping alive their culture, but it's here also that we are quite active.
Yes. Right. I think on that note, we have to wrap up the panel discussion. I think the audience will agree with me that this has been a fascinating journey into the past in uncovering the urban legacy of the Jewish diaspora in Bombay. And of course, we thank Avid Learning for this opportunity to come here and do this panel discussion. I personally thank both of you, Professor Neeta Khandpekar and Mrs. Sifra Lentin. It's been a pleasure to moderate the panel. Over to you, Asad.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamat, for so skillfully covering such a large topic. It was very nostalgic for me. Over the years, Avid has been involved with the Kalagoda Arts Festival for probably 7 years. And I've had the privilege of co-curating the literature section of the festival, which would be at the David Sassoon Library. And so we used to spend 10 days nonstop every year at this time in that lovely space. So it was lovely to see this come full circle. Unfortunately, the festival is on just now, but only online, but that's also great. So I encourage people to go there and check it out. But thank you for sharing your insights. It's privileged to have such qualified academics share their perspectives with us. A big thank you to our audience for sharing so many questions and so many in such large numbers. Unfortunately, time is a paucity. Otherwise, we would address most of them. Stay tuned for our next session, which is on landscape architecture on Thursday the 11th, followed by another session on empowering through technology on the 18th of Feb. For more information about our programs, just follow us on social media or check out our website. Again, until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and remember that learning never stops. Thank you very much to our panel and have a good evening.